Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you today. My name is Josef Settele, and I'm co-chair of the Global Assessment of IPBES. IPBES is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. I want to summarize today the main results of our assessment and also present some insights into the link between biodiversity and the recent pandemics. First of all, the global assessment. This was done in the last 3 years with a team of 500 people, led by 3 colleagues, myself and 2 friends of mine from North America and Argentina. We had some very important findings, summarized as follows: that the biosphere and the atmosphere, upon which humanity as a whole depends, have been deeply reconfigured by people. 3/4 of the land area is very significantly altered. 2/3 of the ocean area is experiencing increasing cumulative impacts, and more than 85% of wetlands on a global scale have been lost. We also could find out that the global extinction rate for species is at least tens to hundreds of times higher than it has been in average over the last 110 million years. And by and large, we can assume that within the next decades, we might lose 1 million species if we really do not counteract. Also, on the negative side, we looked on the nature's contributions to people, often known as ecosystem services. We had 18 different categories, and most of them showed a negative trend in the last 50 years. For example, the habitat creation, habitat maintenance went down quite a lot, pollination was decreasing, but also regulation of air quality. We had some increases, for example, in energy, this biomass production, also in food in terms of carbohydrates, but 14 out of 18 of these services showed negative trends. So we have dramatically reconfigured the fabric of life of the planet. And our world is becoming much more interconnected, yet increasingly unequal. What we also done was we looked at the direct drivers. This means that meeting global societal goals through urgent and concerted efforts addressing direct drivers of change have accelerated during the past 50 years to levels unprecedented in human history. So the main drivers we analyzed are land use change, sea use change, direct exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species. And it's in this sequence that have been most important in the last 50 years. So land use and sea use change is the most dominant one so far, and climate change is number 3, but with a trend of being increasingly important in the coming future. But besides the direct drivers, we looked at the indirect ones, which really are responsible for all the things which are happening on the globe. And very simplified, we can say we have to look at things like governance and economic systems and equity and cross-sectoral planning, incentives, and social narratives and values. All of them have a heavy impact on the direct drivers like climate change and land use change. And if we want to achieve our joint visions we have on the globe in terms of biodiversity conservation and maintaining ecosystems, we have to move in a direction which we call a transformative change, which requires changes in production and consumption of energy and food, which requires low to moderate population growth, and nature-friendly and socially fair climate adaptation and mitigation. This transformative change is defined as a fundamental system-wide reorganization of technological, economic, and social factors, including paradigms, targets, and values. So challenges related to climate change, nature deterioration, and achieving a good quality of life for all are really interconnected. Therefore, they need to be addressed synergistically from local to global levels. And the key constituent of sustainable pathways is the evolution of global financial and economic systems to build a global sustainable economy, one that steers away from the current limited paradigm of economic growth. These are some of the key statements of the assessment, and related to the last one, I want to just make a few words on the pandemic. So COVID-19 and biodiversity and the linkage between them. We made a statement on the IPBES homepage on this in a team of 4 people. And first of all, it's important to know that pandemics can develop if there is a lot of contact between people and animals and wildlife. That's quite an important precondition. Now, in recent times, we had we created a perfect storm, which means we created conditions for these pandemics to happen. We had a kind of let's say, a kind of intensive loss of forest, with extension of agriculture, intensive land use in terms of animal breeding. We have mining, and we have infrastructure developments. We have exploitation of wild species, and we have an unregulated trade of wild animals, and an explosion kind of increase of the global travel. So these are all kind of conditions which really, let's say, promote the pandemics. And then we have to be careful that now the measures we take to, let's say, look at the effects of the pandemic doesn't create new risks for new pandemics in the future. And there are three important components for this billion kind of programs for our economy. And the one is about environmental standards which have to be kept. We have to follow One Health approach, which means we have to, let's look at the health of animals, of people, of course, and health of ecosystems in combination. And we have to look at the health systems. So, but by and large, it's important to really prevent the destruction of nature and to reduce the direct interaction of big numbers of animals with big numbers of people. As a conclusion from this and the global assessment, we can say that the loss of species, degradation of ecosystems, and loss of ecosystem services, and the business as usual is clearly unsustainable. This also is a call for action for transformational change, which means to tackle the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss, to address climate change and loss of biodiversity together, to replicate and scale successful policies and projects, to coordinate and integrate cross-sectoral actions, and to evolve economic and financial systems. We have to ensure inclusive governance structures, which includes governments, private sector, civil society, and local communities. I hope this gave a short overview, and I hope you have a successful meeting. Thanks for your attention, and good luck. Bye-bye.